There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot heal, a heaviness that settles quietly inside the heart after days, months, or even years of carrying too much. Modern life moves endlessly. Every morning begins with noise, notifications, headlines, wars, disasters, anger, division, human suffering delivered endlessly through glowing screens we carry in our pockets. And somewhere along the way, many people begin to feel responsible for all of it. You scroll through stories of tragedy while sitting alone in a silent room, a child suffering in one country, violence in another, fear spreading across cities you will never visit. Slowly, without realizing it, the mind begins collecting pain like stones placed into an invisible backpack. At first, it feels like compassion, but eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. The ancient Zen masters understood this long before the modern world existed. There is an old story about a young monk named Kenji who lived in a quiet monastery surrounded by green hills and soft rivers. Every morning before sunrise, he sat in meditation beneath the cool mountain air. Every evening, he walked silently through the monastery gardens, listening to the wind move through the trees. His practice was sincere, and his heart was deeply compassionate. But the more Kenji learned about the suffering of the world, the heavier his spirit became. He heard travelers speak about war, hunger, sickness, and cruelty. He saw sadness in the eyes of strangers. Even during meditation, his mind filled with images of pain he could not erase. Eventually, the suffering of the world began crushing him from within. One morning, unable to carry it any longer, Kenji approached his teacher, Master Tanaka. "Master," he said softly, "how can I find peace while so many people suffer? Every day, I feel the pain of the world growing heavier inside me. I want to help, but instead I feel myself drowning." Master Tanaka looked at the young monk quietly. Then he pointed toward a large stone resting beside the garden path. "Pick it up," the master said. Kenji bent down and lifted the stone with both arms. It was far heavier than he expected. "Now carry it with you all day." Confused but obedient, Kenji did exactly as instructed. He carried the stone to meditation. He carried it while eating. He carried it while sweeping the temple floor. Hour after hour, the weight dug deeper into his muscles. His breathing became strained. His back ached. By sunset, exhaustion consumed him completely. Finally, trembling with fatigue, Kenji returned to the master. "I cannot carry it anymore," he whispered. Master Tanaka looked at him gently, then put it down. The moment the stone touched the earth, relief flooded through Kenji's body. His shoulders softened. His breath deepened. For the first time all day, he felt free. Then the old master spoke words that would remain with him forever. "The suffering of the world is real," Tanaka said quietly, "but you were never meant to carry all of it on your shoulders. Compassion does not mean destroying yourself beneath the weight of pain. You must learn the difference between caring and carrying. That distinction changes everything." Many people believe compassion means absorbing the suffering of others until they themselves collapse. But Zen teaches something far deeper. True compassion requires clarity. If your mind is drowning in fear, exhaustion, and emotional overwhelm, you lose the ability to truly help anyone. A drowning person cannot save another drowning person. The Buddha once taught that suffering grows when attachment blinds wisdom, and sometimes we become attached even to pain itself. We mistake emotional exhaustion for kindness. We believe carrying endless anxiety proves we care deeply, but in reality, constant emotional overwhelm only darkens the mind. Zen does not teach coldness or indifference. It teaches balance. To care deeply without becoming consumed. To remain open without breaking apart. To witness suffering without carrying every stone into your own heart. Tonight, perhaps there are stones you have been carrying for too long. Worries about the future, the pain of others, the pressure to fix everything, the exhausting belief that you must hold the entire world together alone. But maybe peace begins the moment you finally allow yourself to put some of those stones down. The stone Master Tanaka gave to Kenji was never just a stone. It was a mirror, a reflection of the invisible weight so many people carry every single day without even realizing it. Emotional burdens, fear, anxiety, the suffering of strangers, the expectations of family, the pressure to heal everyone around them while silently falling apart themselves. At first, these burdens seem small. One painful headline, one friend's sadness, one argument, one tragedy seen through a glowing screen late at night. But the mind does something dangerous. It holds on to each experience. It collects them quietly, like stones placed into a bag carried over the shoulders of the soul. And eventually, the spirit becomes exhausted. Modern life has created a condition the ancient Zen masters understood deeply, even without smartphones or endless media. Today, many people wake up and immediately begin consuming suffering. Before the sun fully rises, the mind is already flooded with war, anger, disaster, fear, outrage, and grief. Endless scrolling becomes a ritual of emotional overload. This is what many now call doomscrolling. The fingers continue moving, searching for more information, more updates, more stories, even while the nervous system quietly collapses under the pressure. The strange thing is that most people believe this habit comes from awareness or compassion, but often it comes from something more complicated. The ego secretly wants to feel responsible for everything. There is a hidden belief deep within the mind that says, if I worry enough, maybe I can control suffering. If I carry enough pain, maybe I am a good person. If I absorb the sadness of the world, maybe I am helping somehow. But suffering absorbed unconsciously does not heal the world. It only creates another wounded mind within it. Zen Buddhism teaches something called emotional non-attachment. This idea is often misunderstood. People hear the words and imagine becoming cold, distant, or uncaring. But true non-attachment is not emotional numbness. It is emotional balance. It means learning to care deeply without drowning. A Zen teacher once compared compassion to the work of a doctor. Imagine a physician standing beside a patient in pain. The doctor listens carefully. They understand the suffering completely. They respond with skill, calmness, and presence. But if the doctor absorbs the patient's pain into their own body and mind completely, they lose the ability to help. Compassion without clarity becomes collapse. This is why so many deeply empathetic people feel chronically exhausted. They confuse love with emotional fusion. They believe caring for others means carrying every burden personally. Slowly, their inner peace disappears beneath the weight of problems they were never meant to hold alone. You can see this everywhere in daily life. A mother who silently absorbs the emotional struggles of her children until anxiety consumes her sleep. A man constantly trying to rescue everyone around him while neglecting his own spirit. Someone lying awake at night, replaying world events they cannot control, feeling guilty for resting, while suffering exists somewhere else on earth. Stone after stone after stone. The Zen path asks a gentle but uncomfortable question. What pain truly belongs to you? Not every burden is yours to carry. Not every tragedy requires you to destroy your nervous system in response. Wisdom means learning the difference between compassionate action and emotional self-destruction. The Buddha taught that peace does not come from controlling the world. Peace comes from understanding the mind. And sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is protect the clarity of your own heart. Because a peaceful mind can still serve others. A burned-out mind cannot. Tonight, perhaps you can pause for a moment and notice the stones you've collected, the fears, the emotional noise, the pressure to save everyone, the exhaustion hidden behind your constant worrying. And maybe, little by little, you can begin setting some of them down. There is a quiet difference between caring for someone and carrying them. At first, the two can feel almost identical. Both come from love, both come from empathy. Both arise from the deep human desire to ease suffering. But over time, one creates peace, while the other slowly destroys it. Zen Buddhism teaches that much of human suffering comes not only from pain itself, but from the way the mind clings to pain and turns it into identity. We begin to absorb the suffering around us until we no longer know where another person's emotions end and our own begin. This is the hidden trap of co-suffering. Imagine sitting beside someone you love who is overwhelmed by anxiety, grief, or anger. Your heart naturally opens toward them. You want to comfort them. You want to protect them. But slowly, without realizing it, their emotional storm becomes your storm. Their fear enters your nervous system. Their sadness follows you into the night. Their burden settles into your chest like a heavy stone. Instead of helping them carry the pain wisely, you begin drowning beside them. This is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is unconscious, immediate, emotional. It pulls us into the suffering until clarity disappears. Response is different. Response comes from stillness, from awareness, from the ability to remain grounded even while standing near pain. The Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This wisdom points towards something profound. When we absorb suffering without awareness, suffering multiplies itself. Anger creates more anger. Fear creates more fear. Emotional chaos spreads from one mind into another, like fire moving through dry grass. You can see this pattern inside families very easily. One person becomes anxious, and soon the entire household feels unstable. A parent constantly worries about their children until exhaustion consumes them. A husband absorbs the stress of his partner until he loses his own inner balance. Someone spends years trying to emotionally rescue a friend who refuses to heal until both people become trapped in the same darkness. Love slowly turns into depletion. But Zen teaches that true compassion requires inner stability. A peaceful mind becomes shelter for others. A chaotic mind only adds more confusion to the world. Think of a tree during a storm. If the roots are weak, the tree collapses under powerful winds. But if the roots remain deep and steady, the tree can offer protection even while the storm continues around it. Inner peace works the same way. This does not mean becoming cold or emotionally distant. It means learning how to stay open without losing yourself, to listen without absorbing, to love without collapsing, to support without carrying every emotional burden as your own. Many people secretly believe that suffering alongside others proves the depth of their love. But often, suffering together only leaves both people without light. Sometimes the greatest gift you can offer another human being is not your worry, but your calm presence. A steady voice, a quiet heart, a mind that does not panic, because peace is contagious too. When someone sits beside a person who is deeply grounded, something inside the nervous system begins to soften naturally. Breathing slows, fear weakens, the body remembers safety again. Healing often begins there. Tonight, perhaps you can gently ask yourself, which burdens in your life come from genuine compassion and which come from unconsciously carrying emotions that were never fully yours? And maybe, slowly, with kindness toward yourself, you can begin returning to balance, not by closing your heart, but by learning how to keep it open without letting every storm inside. Long ago, in a quiet mountain monastery hidden beyond forests of cedar and mist, a young monk named Hogan arrived with hope burning brightly inside his heart. He had traveled for weeks across narrow roads and cold rivers to study under the famous Zen master Joshu, whose wisdom was known throughout the land. People said that even a single sentence from the old master could awaken a sleeping soul. Hogan believed this monastery would change his life. From the very first morning, he devoted himself completely to the practice. Before dawn, while the sky was still dark blue and silent, he sat in meditation with unwavering focus. During the day, he worked tirelessly in the gardens, swept the temple paths, carried water from the river, and studied the teachings late into the night while others slept. Every action was filled with effort. Every breath carried expectation. Deep inside, Hogan hoped the master would notice him. At first, this desire seemed harmless, human even. Like many sincere people, Hogan wanted reassurance that his hard work mattered. He wanted confirmation that he was progressing, that he was worthy, that he belonged. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, and Master Joshu barely acknowledged his existence. During teachings, the master's eyes drifted past Hogan as though he were invisible. When other students asked questions, Joshu responded with long, thoughtful explanations. But when Hogan spoke, the answers were short and distant. Sometimes the master did not respond at all. At night, while the monastery slept beneath the sound of wind and rain, Hogan's thoughts grew darker. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe the master sees no potential in me. Maybe everyone else belongs here except me. Slowly, dedication transformed into insecurity. And this suffering is far more common than most people realize. Even today, countless people live exactly like Hogan. A worker spends years giving everything to their job, secretly hoping someone will finally appreciate them. A creator posts endlessly online, waiting for likes, comments, and recognition to prove their worth. Someone enters relationships, constantly searching for validation through attention and approval. Modern life has created entire systems built around being seen. Social media, especially, has amplified one of the deepest human fears: invisibility. Many people no longer ask, "Am I at peace?" Instead, they ask, "Am I noticed?" The silence of others begins to feel unbearable. No response becomes rejection. No praise becomes proof of inadequacy. And so the mind becomes trapped in endless comparison. Hogan watched other monks receive private conversations with the master. He saw them praised for their insight or discipline. Each moment sharpened the quiet pain growing inside him. The more invisible he felt, the harder he worked. The harder he worked, the more desperately he needed recognition. Until finally, one cold autumn morning, Hogan could no longer contain his frustration. He approached Master Joshu in the monastery courtyard, where the old teacher sat peacefully beside a stone garden covered in fallen leaves. Hogan bowed deeply, but beneath the bow was years of wounded pride. "Master," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I have practiced with sincerity since the day I arrived. I have devoted myself completely to this monastery, yet you give me no guidance, no attention, no recognition. I feel like nothing more than a useless stone beneath your feet." For a long moment, Joshu said nothing. The wind moved softly through the trees. Then the old master looked down at the stones lining the monastery pathways and asked quietly, "Tell me, Hogan, do you see these stones?" "Yes, master." "Do they complain because no one praises them?" Hogan remained silent. Joshu continued softly, "These stones support the entire temple. They ask for nothing, no attention, no recognition. Yet without them, everything would collapse." Something inside Hogan began to crack open. For the first time, he saw the hidden suffering beneath his spiritual practice. He had not been seeking truth. He had been seeking validation. Even his devotion carried a secret hunger to be seen as special. And perhaps this is one of the deepest struggles of the human heart. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of being unseen. Master Joshu's words lingered in the cold mountain air long after he finished speaking. Hogan stood silently in the monastery courtyard, staring at the stones beneath his feet. For years, he had walked across them without noticing them at all. They held the weight of every monk who entered the temple. They supported the garden paths, the walls, the meditation hall itself. Yet no one praised them, no one admired them, no one stopped to thank them for their quiet service. And still, they remained exactly where they were meant to be. Something inside Hogan began to soften. For the first time, he saw how much of his suffering had come not from being ignored by others, but from his desperate need to be recognized. Hidden beneath his discipline and devotion was a quiet addiction to validation. He wanted proof that he mattered, proof that he was progressing, proof that he was special. But the more he searched for approval, the emptier he became. This is the strange hunger of the ego. It constantly whispers that fulfillment exists somewhere outside ourselves, in praise, in applause, in admiration, in being chosen, noticed, or celebrated. And for a moment, external approval feels comforting. A compliment, a promotion, a flood of attention online. The mind lights up briefly with satisfaction, but the feeling never lasts. Soon the hunger returns again. Another achievement, another post, another attempt to prove worthiness to the world. The cycle becomes endless because validation can never fully satisfy a mind that secretly doubts its own value. No amount of applause can permanently silence inner insecurity. Zen Buddhism understands this deeply. The ego survives through comparison and recognition. It constantly measures itself against others, searching for signs of superiority or importance. But true peace begins when the need to constantly measure yourself finally falls away. This is why Master Joshu pointed toward the stones. The stones did not compete. They did not perform. They did not seek attention. And yet their value was undeniable. Many people today live trapped in what could be called visibility addiction. Social media has amplified this ancient human craving into something relentless. People begin tying their self-worth to numbers on a screen: views, likes, followers, responses. Silence starts feeling like failure. Even outside the digital world, the same pattern appears everywhere. A person works tirelessly at their job, hoping someone will finally appreciate them. A parent sacrifices endlessly for their family, while quietly longing to be acknowledged. Someone gives love constantly while secretly waiting for reassurance in return. And when recognition does not come, pain appears. Not because they lack value, but because they have forgotten where value truly comes from. Zen teaches something called beginner's mind, a way of existing without constantly trying to prove yourself. Like a child watching rain fall for the first time, beginner's mind simply participates in life without obsession over status or identity. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is no longer needing to constantly think about yourself at all. This realization began unfolding slowly inside Hogan as he looked at the temple stones. He suddenly understood that the most important things in life are often the least noticed. The roots beneath the tree, the silent breath sustaining the body, the friend who listens quietly, the ordinary moments holding everything together without applause. Value does not disappear simply because nobody claps for it. The moon does not need permission to shine. The river does not ask to be admired before it flows. And perhaps human beings were never meant to build their worth upon the unstable opinions of others. Tears quietly filled Hogan's eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. For years he had exhausted himself trying to become someone worthy of recognition, while all along his simple presence had already been enough. In that moment, the monastery felt different. The wind moving through the trees, the distant sound of bells, the cold stones beneath his feet. Everything seemed deeply alive and complete, exactly as it was. And maybe this is one of the deepest truths Zen offers. Your worth is not created by attention. It already exists before anyone notices it. There is a quiet hunger living inside many human beings. A hunger not for food, money, or comfort, but for recognition. The desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to feel important in the eyes of others. Most people carry this hunger so deeply that they no longer notice it controlling their lives. It hides beneath ambition, perfectionism, success, even spirituality. It whispers constantly through the mind. Am I enough? Do people admire me? Am I falling behind? Why are others receiving more attention than me? Zen Buddhism calls this attachment to the self-image the root of much suffering. The ego survives by comparison. It builds identity by measuring itself against others endlessly. And because comparison never truly ends, the mind remains restless no matter how much recognition it receives. This conditioning often begins in childhood. A child receives praise for good grades and slowly learns that achievement brings love. Another child is compared to siblings or classmates and begins believing worth must be earned through performance. Over time, many people unconsciously build their entire identity around being admired, successful, intelligent, attractive, or exceptional. The problem is not achievement itself. The problem is becoming emotionally dependent on it. Because eventually, life changes. Someone else becomes more successful, younger, more talented, more visible. The applause fades. And when identity is built entirely upon recognition, the loss of attention feels like the loss of self. Modern culture intensifies this suffering dramatically. Social media has transformed human attention into a marketplace. Every post quietly asks the same question: do I matter? People refresh screens, searching for proof of worth through numbers and reactions. A few moments of validation create temporary excitement, but soon the mind hungers again. More views, more approval, more visibility, and beneath all of it often lives exhaustion. Even spiritual practice can become infected by this ego hunger. A person meditates not to find peace, but to feel superior. Someone seeks enlightenment as another achievement to display. They want to become special through spirituality itself. This is what Zen masters warned about for centuries. The ego can turn even wisdom into performance. A monk may wear humble robes while secretly craving admiration for being humble. A person may speak softly about inner peace, while internally comparing themselves to everyone around them. The performance simply changes shape, but the suffering remains the same. The Buddha taught that attachment creates suffering because everything external eventually changes. Praise fades, status disappears, beauty ages, public attention moves elsewhere. If identity depends entirely on these unstable things, the heart becomes trapped in constant fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of becoming invisible. This is why so many people feel anxious, even when their lives appear successful. They are not living anymore. They are performing. Performing intelligence, performing success, performing happiness, performing spirituality, and performance is exhausting. Zen offers another path, a quieter path, the path of releasing the need to constantly prove yourself. A tree does not compare itself to the forest. The moon does not compete with the stars. They simply exist fully as themselves. This is the freedom of letting go of performance identity, not becoming passive or ambitionless, but no longer building your entire sense of worth upon the shifting opinions of others. True peace begins when you stop asking the world for permission to feel valuable. Perhaps that is why the most peaceful people often seem ordinary. They are no longer obsessed with being extraordinary. They do not need constant validation to feel alive. Their presence becomes calm because their identity is no longer chained to applause. Tonight, maybe you can gently notice the parts of yourself still searching desperately to be seen, the exhaustion of comparison, the endless performance, the quiet fear of not being enough. And maybe for a moment, you can rest from all of it, not because you have finally earned worth, but because your worth was never missing in the first place. After speaking with Master Joshu, Hogan began seeing the monastery differently. The stones lining the pathways no longer looked ordinary. They seemed alive with quiet wisdom. Day after day, they remained beneath the feet of everyone who entered the temple. They supported the walls during storms. They held the garden together through changing seasons. Yet they never demanded recognition for what they carried. They simply remained steady. This was the beginning of what Zen masters sometimes call the stone mind, a mind that no longer chases constant attention, a mind grounded in simplicity, stability, and silent service. Modern life rarely values this kind of presence. The world celebrates noise, speed, visibility, and performance. People are taught to constantly promote themselves, prove themselves, and compete for attention. But beneath all the movement, many hearts quietly long for rest. The stone mind offers another way of living, not weak, not passive, but deeply rooted. A stone does not panic during rain. It does not compare itself to other stones. It does not fear being unnoticed. Its strength comes from simply remaining what it is. Zen teaches that there is profound freedom in this kind of steadiness. One of the simplest Zen practices is called just sitting. At first, it sounds almost meaningless. Sit quietly, breathe, do nothing special. But hidden inside this simplicity is a radical truth. Human beings do not always need to achieve something in order to be complete. Sometimes existence itself is enough. And this practice extends far beyond meditation cushions and monastery walls. Just sitting becomes a way of moving through ordinary life. When you work, simply work. When you eat, simply eat. When someone speaks to you, simply listen. Not to impress, not to gain approval, not to prepare your next performance. Just fully present. There is great healing in this. Imagine how different conversations would feel if people listened without secretly needing credit, superiority, or validation. Imagine working without constantly checking whether others noticed your effort. Imagine helping someone quietly without needing praise afterward. This is the dignity of quiet presence. A calm person entering a room can change its entire atmosphere without saying a single word. Like a stone supporting a temple, their strength is subtle but real. They do not drain others with endless performance. Their presence feels safe because it is not demanding anything. Zen masters understood that the deepest forms of service are often invisible. The person who quietly supports their family every day, the friend who listens without judgment, the worker who acts with sincerity even when nobody is watching. These lives may appear ordinary from the outside, But there is something profoundly peaceful about people who no longer need to constantly prove their value. In many ways, this quiet steadiness is far more powerful than loud success. The world changes constantly. Trends rise and disappear. Attention moves quickly from one thing to another, but a grounded heart remains stable through all of it. Like stones beneath the temple, these people become foundations others can lean upon, without even realizing why they feel comfort near them. Tonight, perhaps you are tired of performing, tired of comparison, tired of carrying the pressure to always appear important, productive, or extraordinary. If so, maybe the stone mind is inviting you to rest, to stop chasing applause for a moment, to stop measuring your worth through visibility, to simply exist fully where you are. Because sometimes the most meaningful lives are not the loudest ones. Sometimes the strongest people are the quiet ones who continue offering steadiness, kindness, and presence without needing the world to notice. Like the stones beneath the temple, they hold more than anyone sees. In the ancient city of Kyoto, where temple bells echoed through narrow streets and cherry blossoms drifted softly across stone bridges, there lived a man whose name carried immense power. Governor Nakamura was one of the most respected officials in the region. Thousands of lives were shaped by his decisions. Merchants bowed as he passed through the markets. Soldiers stood straighter in his presence. Servants lowered their eyes whenever he entered a room. From the outside, his life appeared complete. He lived in a grand residence filled with silk curtains, polished wood, and carefully tended gardens. Every day was governed by ceremony and protocol. Attendants dressed him in elaborate robes before sunrise. Officials greeted him with long formal titles. Every movement, every word, every expression was measured carefully to preserve dignity and authority. Yet beneath all the admiration and success, something inside Nakamura felt painfully empty. At night, after the ceremonies ended and the halls grew quiet, he would sit alone staring into candlelight, unable to explain the strange loneliness growing within him. Surrounded constantly by people, he somehow felt unseen. The more respect he received, the more distant he felt from his own humanity. Because no one spoke to him as a person anymore. They spoke only to the governor. Over time, Nakamura realized he had become trapped inside his identity. His title no longer felt like an honor. It felt like armor he could never remove. Even his smiles felt rehearsed. Even his kindness carried the weight of performance. Then one day, he heard stories about a Zen master named Kayu, who lived quietly in the hills beyond the city. Travelers claimed the old master possessed an unusual wisdom that cut through illusion like a blade through silk. They said people left his presence feeling strangely free. Something deep inside Nakamura stirred. And so, following tradition and protocol, the governor arranged a formal visit. On the morning of his journey, servants dressed him in his finest robes embroidered with gold thread. Guards surrounded him. Attendants carried official seals and ceremonial gifts. As they approached the humble hermitage where Master Kayu lived, Nakamura's chief attendant stepped forward and knocked respectfully on the small wooden door. When the old Zen master appeared, the attendant bowed deeply and announced in a loud, formal voice, "Honored Master Kayu, the great Governor Nakamura, protector of the province and servant of the emperor, has come seeking your wisdom." The old master listened silently. Then, without changing expression, he replied calmly, "I have no business with such a person." And he closed the door. Shock spread through the attendants immediately. Never in his life had Nakamura been rejected. People competed desperately for his attention. Yet this old monk had dismissed him completely, as though his titles meant nothing. For a moment, humiliation burned inside him. But then, something unexpected happened. Standing there in silence before the closed wooden door, Nakamura suddenly saw the truth with painful clarity. The master had not rejected him as a human being. He had rejected the identity he was hiding behind. The governor slowly looked down at his elaborate robes, his golden seals, his attendants waiting nervously around him. For the first time, he realized how heavy it all had become. Without speaking, Nakamura removed his outer garments. He dismissed his guards and servants. One by one, the symbols of status disappeared until only a simple man remained standing beneath the quiet mountain sky. Then he walked back to the door alone. This time, when the master opened it, Nakamura bowed deeply and spoke softly. "My name is Daido. I have come seeking understanding. The old master's face immediately softened into a warm smile. Ah, Caillou said gently, stepping aside. Now you may enter. And in that moment, something inside Nakamura finally broke open. For years, he had believed his identity was built from titles, achievements, and social importance. But standing there before the humble Zen master, stripped of status and performance, he felt something he had not experienced in years. Relief. Because beneath every role human beings play, there is still a simple person quietly longing to be free. When Governor Nakamura returned to the hermitage a second time, everything was different. There were no guards walking behind him, no servants announcing his arrival, no silk robes flowing around his body. The symbols of power that once surrounded him had been left behind on the mountain path. Now there was only a simple man standing quietly before a wooden door. When the Zen master opened it again, Nakamura bowed deeply and spoke with a softness that had almost disappeared from his life. "My name is Dido," he said. "I have come seeking understanding." The moment those words left his mouth, Master Caillou smiled warmly and stepped aside. "Welcome," the old monk said gently. "Please come in." No elaborate introduction was needed. No titles, no status, no performance. For the first time in many years, Nakamura felt accepted not for what he represented, but for who he truly was beneath the role. And that realization touched something very deep inside him. Human beings spend much of their lives building identities. We collect titles, achievements, professions, social roles, and personal stories, then slowly begin believing those things are who we are. A person becomes the successful businessman, the perfect mother, the spiritual teacher, the strong one, the intelligent one. Over time, these identities harden into masks. At first, the mask feels useful. It helps us function in society. But eventually, many people become trapped inside the role they created. They no longer know how to exist without performing it. This is why so many people secretly feel exhausted, even when their lives appear successful from the outside. They are carrying identities that never allow them to fully rest. The lawyer who cannot stop being the professional, even at home. The parent who feels guilty whenever they are not sacrificing themselves for others. The person online constantly shaping their personality around how they wish to be perceived. Every role creates pressure. Every mask demands maintenance. And the deeper the attachment becomes, the more distant people grow from their authentic selves. Zen Buddhism teaches that identity itself is often an illusion, not because roles are meaningless, but because they are temporary. Beneath every label exists something much quieter and more human. Alan Watts once said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." This insight points toward extraordinary freedom. Most suffering comes from clinging too tightly to fixed ideas about who we are supposed to be. The mind becomes terrified of failure because failure threatens identity. It fears rejection because rejection damages the image it works so hard to construct. But what happens when the mask begins to fall away? For Nakamura, that moment came in the silence of the hermitage. Sitting beside Master Caillou, with nothing left to prove, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The governor disappeared. The performance disappeared. Even the constant pressure of maintaining dignity and control began dissolving. What remained was simply a human being, breathing, listening, existing. And perhaps this is what many people are truly searching for beneath all ambition and achievement. Not more status, not more attention, but freedom from the exhausting burden of constantly performing an identity. Modern society rarely encourages this. People are rewarded for appearances, roles, and carefully constructed images. Social media especially intensifies this illusion. Individuals shape entire digital versions of themselves, polishing personalities for approval while feeling increasingly disconnected from their inner reality. The more the image grows, the lonelier the person often becomes. Because no mask, no matter how beautiful, can fully replace genuine human connection. Zen invites us back to something simpler, not the destruction of identity, but freedom beyond it. You can still fulfill your responsibilities. You can still work, create, lead, and care for others. But inwardly, You no longer mistake the role for the entirety of who you are. Like an actor stepping off a stage after a performance, you remember that the costume was never your true self. Tonight, perhaps you can gently ask yourself, who are you beneath the titles? Beneath the expectations? Beneath the personality you constantly maintain for the world? And if, for just one quiet moment, you stopped performing entirely, what part of you would finally breathe again? As the night grows quieter and these stories begin settling gently into the heart, a deeper pattern slowly reveals itself. The young monk carrying the heavy stone, Hogan searching desperately for recognition, Governor Nakamura trapped beneath layers of titles and status. Though their lives appeared different, they were all suffering from the same hidden burden. They had forgotten how to let go. The human mind clings constantly to identity, to approval, to fear, to pain, to the endless pressure of becoming someone. And because of this clinging, the mind rarely rests. Zen wisdom does not ask us to escape the world. It asks us to stop carrying unnecessary weight within it. Again and again, the stories point toward the same quiet truth. Peace begins the moment we loosen our grip. Kenji discovered that compassion does not require self-destruction. Hogan learned that true worth exists even without applause. Nakamura realized that titles and social masks can never replace authentic humanity. Each story gently peeled away another layer of illusion. And beneath all those layers was something surprisingly simple: presence. Not the endless performance of identity, not the anxious search for validation, not the exhausting attempt to control everything. Just this moment, a breath entering the body, wind moving softly through trees, the sound of distant rain, the quiet awareness beneath thought itself. Zen masters often spoke about self-forgetting. At first, this idea sounds strange, even frightening. Modern culture teaches people to constantly build themselves, improve themselves, promote themselves, defend themselves. But Zen asks a completely different question. What if the self you are struggling to protect is only a temporary story? The more tightly people cling to identity, the more fragile they become. Every criticism feels threatening. Every rejection becomes painful. Every failure feels personal. But when identity softens, life itself begins to soften too. The restless mind finally starts becoming quiet. Not because problems disappear completely, but because the inner war against life slowly ends. This is why simplicity is so deeply healing. A quiet walk without needing productivity. A conversation without performance. A moment of silence without reaching for distraction. These ordinary experiences become sacred again when the mind stops demanding that every moment prove something about who we are. Humility also begins growing naturally here. Not humiliation, not self-denial, but the peaceful realization that we do not need to be extraordinary in order to be complete. The moon shines without announcing itself. Rivers flow without asking for praise. Nature exists fully without comparison. And perhaps human beings were meant to live this way too. Mindfulness, in its deepest sense, is simply returning home to the present moment again and again. Each breath becomes an invitation to step out of mental noise and back into direct experience. Not yesterday's regrets, not tomorrow's fears, just this living moment unfolding quietly before you. Even compassion changes when awareness deepens. Instead of carrying the suffering of the entire world like a crushing stone, the heart learns to respond gently and clearly. Love no longer comes from exhaustion, it comes from steadiness. The Buddha once taught, peace comes from within, do not seek it without. Perhaps this is the truth all these Zen stories were pointing toward from the very beginning. What you are searching for has never been far away, not hidden in status, not hidden in recognition, not hidden in becoming someone else, but here, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the endless movement of thought. Tonight, as you breathe quietly and allow these words to settle, maybe you can let go of something you no longer need to carry. A pressure, a role, a fear, a version of yourself you have been exhausting yourself trying to maintain. And for a moment, simply rest. Because sometimes enlightenment begins not by adding more to yourself, but by finally setting something down. If these stories brought peace to your heart, stay on this path.